I've met Tulsi Gabbard multiple times. We've had conversations before. And while I think that there are some things that she's addressed over the years that were of considerable validity, there is no question that she is as opportunistic as anybody that you're going to see in politics today. And it's even more strange because she's not even sitting in a congressional position where she feels she has to protect her job. I don't know what the hell she's up to or what her thought process is, but
maybe it's just who she is. Like,
I'm not saying that she isn't who. I'm not doubting
that. Maybe she's just being her.
So we're going to play a clip for you guys right now, and this is going to show you point blank just how sinister and evil some people can be, where it's not just about we have to protect the Israelis. We have to go after people who don't align with where we stand. That's the real
right. That's it. It's not defense. It's offense.
Oh, offense times 10. Here we go.
I don't know if Kamala knows what she's up to, but the reality here is when you look at things like what Representative Cori Bush is saying, what the Squad is saying, what so many of these other people are saying who are accusing Israel of committing a genocide, it is the height of hypocrisy because they're apologists and supporters of these Islamist Hamas terrorists who are calling for a genocide, the extermination of all Jews, not just in Israel, but around the world. And we're seeing this being carried out by these violent mobs and threats and other things that are happening against Jewish people literally around the world. And the worst part is they're doing this under the guise of, well, we care about innocent people and we don't want people to get hurt, when in fact, they are, in essence, supporting and apologizing for the barbaric actions of Hamas against innocent women, children, and civilians.
I called it creating the monster, like they're Dr. Frankenstein. And now the monster in their progressive wing is turning against them. But they're trying to pretend like this is kind of a shocking development. It's not a shocking development. No. This has always been there, but it's also deeply anti-American, is it not?
It is, and it is against the very foundational principles and values of who we are as a country. These Democrats, they have called people like me an Islamophobe for many years just for speaking the truth about radical Islam, about the threat that this Islamism poses to the freedom and peace and security of the American people and people around the world.
Well, do you believe, as do some of these Republicans in the Senate, that we should be bringing in more Afghan refugees? We brought in, 80, 90,000. We didn't vet any of them. I'm sure some of them are great people and helped us in Afghanistan. But do we have 80,000 interpreters or drivers? I mean, I don't think so.
There are many, unquestionably. Yeah. But just like we're so concerned about Biden's open borders and the fact that we've got millions of people coming in who are not vetted in any way, shape, or form, who have not been checked.
But they don't share our values, to Nigel Farage's point as to what you're seeing in England.
Right.
This is, they say, oh, you can't call it a clash of civilizations. Why not? It is a clash of civilization. No women's rights, no belief in pluralism, the dignity of the individual, free expression, none of that.
No.
That's not on the table.
No, and that is the hypocrisy of seeing these, the LGBTQIA activists out there holding and waving the trans flag combined with the Palestinian flags. Like they don't,
that's a new level.
They don't know and understand what this Islamist ideology is, this radical Islam ideology where they actually want to kill people. They want to kill those people specifically.
Tulsi, they have to tie Ukraine to Israel because they know Ukraine
won't stand on its own.
It's not
that funding and again, they're trying to cheat the American people through their representatives by saying, okay, you support and you want to stand with Israel. Well, guess what? We're going to sneak in all of this other money that we're going to take out of your pocket and your bank account to go and support something that increasingly Americans are understanding.
It's not
this
working.
Proxy war against Russia is pushing us closer to nuclear war, and it's not in our best national security interests to do that.
Yeah. She has a lot to say, but a whole lot of crap.
And especially for somebody, remember, her role, and the esteemed Mr. Finkelstein is here, so we'll bring him in a minute. What you guys have to remember, and this is very important, this is not somebody who is just some pontificator on television giving you their opinion about war. This is somebody who serves our country. And she doesn't just serve, she goes into combat zones as a medic. This is a person who literally sees death up front and in person very often. And she's out there saying, oh, let's kill some more people. It's like John McCain reincarnated. It's like the same effing thing. It's like you don't learn from anything. And
well, they're so I'm not even, I don't know if it's a combination of being desensitized and then the fact that we're so good at othering people to the point where literally, and I mean literally, these people believe that Israeli babies are more valuable than Palestinian babies. Like they actually, I think they actually believe that.
And so now what you're going to see is the response that this type of rhetoric gets. And when this ad is over, we will bring in Mr. Finkelstein. This is the ad that they are now playing in the greater Detroit metro area against Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib for having the gall to stand up for free Palestine.
She's one of only 7 Democrats in Congress to vote against missile protection for Israel. One of only 9 Democrats against condemning the brutal attack on Israel by Hamas. Her legislation would allow the terrorists to rearm themselves. And she refuses to answer even this horrific question.
You can't comment about Hamas terrorists chopping off babies' heads?
Tell Rashida Tlaib she's on the wrong side of history and humanity.
Oh, DMFI. Oh,
and they will play that ad on loop every hour on the hour.
Yeah, the reason she won't answer that question about decapitating babies is because it's a stupid, ridiculous question. That's why.
Norman Finkelstein, welcome back to Generational Change.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so immersed in answering emails for hours and hours and hours and hours that even though I have the notice right in front of me, I spent all day, don't forget 1:15, I forgot. I won't be able to be long and you're just going to have to excuse me. I'm not going to try to make excuses, but I'm just completely overwhelmed and I have basic daily tasks to do that I'm not getting done, and like paying my rent, which I should have done yesterday. I'm very old-fashioned. I'm a stickler and a punctual about things like paying your bills and paying rent. So I'm way out of it.
Okay, so let's get to like some of the stuff that I really wanted to ask. What do you feel the need to ask?
I obviously wanted to just get your commentary, because of all of this pro-Israel build-up, you get this advertisement that's basically saying that Rashida Tlaib not only doesn't belong in Congress, but that she should basically be tried for treason. Like, that's the type of ad this is. I'm not convinced it's going to work in her district because her constituents really love her, but the rhetoric is so dangerous, and this idea that they think that it's only against Jews. Only Jews are being persecuted. The amount of anti-Muslim rhetoric, this is 9/11 all over again as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. I'm going to make a few comments. I'm going to go on at greater length than I normally do, and I normally go on at great length. So you'll forgive me, but this will, I think, maybe provide some perspective on the question that you just raised. Number one, I'm going to start with a criticism. I did hear Rashida Tlaib's speech to a crowd of people, I guess it was about a week ago. And the so-called left has been so contaminated, infiltrated by this woke politics, that if she framed her remarks, I felt, in such a narrow, parochial way. She said, we Muslims and we Arabs, we're outraged. And it's as if you have to be a Muslim or an Arab to feel outrage at the fact that 8,000 people have been killed in Gaza, of whom more than 3,000 are children. In fact, I came across the statistic today, which I found kind of astonishing, that in the 20 months of the Ukraine war, 550 children have been killed. I think the exact number, I can get it for you, is 568. And in just 3 weeks, 3,500 Palestinian children have been killed. So, it's things like that that cause me to wonder, why are you casting this as we Muslims and Arabs and not any reasonably sane, decent human being being outraged by this. And I feel it's the contamination and the infiltration of this woke identity politics that once again is proving to be a complete catastrophe for anybody who is identified with the left tradition. The left tradition would never cast it as Muslims and Arabs being specially outraged. But now let's get back to the question that the tape on the question of why she won't condemn. I'm not sure what her most recent statements are, so I don't want to speak and say she didn't condemn. But I'm going to ask you just to bear with me with an analogy, okay? So let's take the case. Your name is, can you give me either of your names?
I'm Jen.
I'm Peter.
Okay. So let's say there's Jen. Jen lives next door to a couple. She's lived there for 20 years. Okay? And she's actually never seen the wife. She knows there's a couple living next door to her. She's seen the husband go off to work in the morning. She never saw the wife. And every once in a while, every year or so, she hears these screaming and yelling coming from the house. She can't figure out what's going on. How can it be? I've been living here all this time. I've never seen her. I know she lives there. I know there's a wife living there. So then she calls the police because she knows something strange is happening. The police go to the house and she then calls the police precinct. Well, what happened? So the police say, well, it's a domestic dispute and we don't want to get involved. Now, you folks might find that strange, but believe me, in my generation, that's exactly what it is. The police would come, see a husband batter a wife. No, because the wife had black eyes and all the ear markings of having been battered. The police would not interfere. It was called a domestic dispute. In my day, the expression was, I'm sure you've heard the expression, but it's not so old. It was my generation. A man's home is his castle. And that meant that what went on inside that home was nobody's business. So one day, Jen gets up and she goes next door, knocks on the door, and she sees the woman answers the door. And the woman looks emaciated, clearly battered, hopeless, despondent. And the woman says, I'm sorry, my husband told me I can't talk to you, and just closes the door. Okay? And this is going on for like 20 years. And believe me, growing up, that actually did happen. By the way, even to respectable families, the stories I could tell. Okay?
Yeah.
One day, Jen comes home from work, and the home of her neighbor is surrounded by police. It turns out the wife in that home stabbed her husband 100 times. 100 times. And then the headlines in the newspaper, the lurid headlines, monster woman stabs husband 100 times. Okay? And then, of course, Jen being a neighbor, the reporters come to her home and ask her, so what do you think of what happened? That woman, what a monster. And Jen reserves judgment, doesn't join in. And the reporter says, wait, you don't think she's a monster? Is something wrong with you? Are you one of those feminists? You think stabbing your husband 100 times is okay? And that's the position Rashida Tlaib is in.
Yeah.
Because all you want to see is monster woman stabbing her husband 100 times. But you don't want to talk about the 20 years that the people of Gaza have been immured in a concentration camp. You don't want to talk about the fact that those Palestinian young men who burst the gates of Gaza, they were born in a concentration camp. They weren't incarcerated in it.
Yeah.
They were born into a concentration camp. They were born into a parcel of land which is 25 miles long, a little shorter than the marathon, and 5 miles wide. They were born into among the most densely populated places on God's earth, more densely populated than Tokyo. They were born into a place where nobody can go in and nobody can go out, with the rarest of exceptions. They were born into a place where half the population are children. Half the population are children. They were born into a place where 70% are refugees from the 1948 war, when Israel expelled the indigenous population, and the descendants of those refugees. They were born into a place where half the population suffers from what's called extreme food insecurity. They were born into a place where half the population is unemployed and 60% of the youth are unemployed. So the bottom line is they were born into a place with no past, no present, and no future. Because as people want to forget that for the past 3 years, Gaza vanished from the headlines. All the talk was about the deal that was going to be brokered between Israel, the US, and Saudi Arabia. Or there was talk of the Abraham Accords. The people of Gaza were just left to languish and die. If you don't like the term concentration camp and you don't like the term open air prison, then just imagine a game preserve. The people of Gaza were confined to a game preserve to languish and die. That is, so to speak, the background story, which, when you're asked the question, weren't those beheadings, even though we don't know if there were beheadings, but we'll leave that aside, weren't those beheadings horrible? Incidentally, just as a point of fact, the largest slave uprising in American history is the Nat Turner Rebellion. And you know, the Nat Turner Rebellion, there's no question, there were a lot of babies beheaded. There were a lot of babies beheaded. And yet, I'm not going to go through all the history because time doesn't allow. But the fact is, the Nat Turner Rebellion now occupies an honored place in American history. Even though Nat Turner gave the order, kill all whites. That was his order. And they proceeded to kill about, pretty brutally, about 60 white people before finally the reaction set in and then the white went berserk. You know, the slaves, they had raised their head. And of course, also brutal. Like the Israelis now, they went berserk and then proceeded to kill about 120 whites, severing their heads and putting it on poles, you know? Not unlike what the Israelis are doing now. A kind of bloodlust revenge. So I can understand the situation that Rashida Tlaib is in, when she doesn't want, assuming she hasn't. Now, I don't know where her statements are, but speaking for myself, I've refused to do it. I've recognized an atrocity of a significant magnitude occurred, but if you want me to take the second step and condemn the perpetrators, that would be like asking me to condemn the battered wife who for 20 years was confined to that home, terrified of her husband, and the outside world, it's a domestic affair. We can't interfere. You know?
Yeah, I heard you talking about that, and I respect it a lot, and I completely agree. I think I always say, if I were born in a concentration camp and I were taught that these are my captors, these are the people that are keeping us here, yeah, I'm pretty sure I would dig tunnels, try to get out, and be angry enough to be killing people. So it's really hard to, condemn that behavior when you are part of the system that has created that. And I definitely am. I am part.
I have a very short temper. If my internet goes out for 3 hours and my internet provider doesn't fix it, I want to strangle them. Now, okay, right. You can say that's metaphorical, but sometimes it comes close to more than metaphorical.
Yeah.
Now, imagine you're sitting in this place, and unfortunately, because of internet, you're seeing everybody in the world having a good time, at least sometimes. People work hard, so forth. But there is a joyous occasion. There is a dinner out, a party, something. And all you have is 25 miles by 5 miles. That's all you have, with the most extreme poverty for 20 years. It started in 2006, this extreme blockade imposed on Gaza. And the last question is, you have these the last comment, excuse me. You have these reporters trailing after her. Are you going to condemn? Okay, right. Are you going to condemn? Well, 3,500 children have been killed in Gaza. Do people trail after Chuck Schumer? Do they trail after Nancy Pelosi? Do they trail after Joe Biden? Are you going to condemn 3,500 children? You're going to tell me that was all because they were targeting Hamas? No, please don't say that.
Believe this still, really. I don't think people believe that. I think a small group in an echo chamber is listening to whatever that is, but the world does not believe that. You can't look at these bomb craters in the middle of Gaza with babies there and think, oh, we're going after Hamas. If you are that incapable and that incompetent in terms of going after who you're going after, then you don't deserve to have self-defense. You should have your weapons taken away from you. Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.